The quiet I sought was not an absence of sound, but a presence of peace. It was the gentle rustle of turning pages, the soft sigh of old leather bindings, the scholarly silence of a room where the dead speak more eloquently than the living. My late wife, Eleanor, used to call it the music of the stacks. She had been the chief archivist at the university library, a woman who moved through the world with a reverence for the past and a fierce determination to preserve it. Our life together was a shared love affair with the written word, a 30-year duet of acquiring, restoring, and cherishing the books that were our passion and our profession. When I lost her to a sudden illness 2 years ago, the silence in our city apartment became a crushing weight. The books, once our shared joy, became painful reminders of a conversation cut short. After 3 decades navigating the treacherous, high-stakes world of rare book auctions and authentications, a world of eccentric billionaires, cunning forgers, and the relentless pressure of 7-figure valuations, I was done. My name, Dr. Elias Vance, had once been a hushed byword for unimpeachable expertise. Now, I wanted it to be the name on the mailbox of a quiet house, on a quiet street, a place where the silence could be filled with memory instead of loss. I sold the apartment, cashed in my investments, and purchased this sprawling ranch house in the meticulously planned community of Willow Creek Glade. For one reason, it was the perfect place to build our dream. Not just a room with bookshelves, but a proper library, a climate-controlled, fire-suppressed, hermetically sealed sanctuary for the collection that was our life's work. It was the last promise I had made to her, a promise to give our books the final, perfect home they deserved. For 2 weeks, my life was a blissful, if melancholy, rhythm of construction and curation. The library annex was completed first, a windowless, fortress-like structure of reinforced concrete and specialized insulation. While the contractors finished the main house, I personally oversaw the installation of the systems that mattered: the dual-zone HVAC that kept the air at a constant 60 degrees Fahrenheit and 50% relative humidity, the argonite gas fire suppression system, the UV-filtered lighting. Then came the books, crates upon crates, delivered by a specialized art handling firm. Unpacking them was a sacred, heart-wrenching ritual. The vellum cover of a 15th-century book of hours we had found in a dusty shop in Bruges. The decal-edged paper of a first-edition Moby Dick I had outbid a tech mogul for, with Eleanor cheering me on via text. Each book was a memory, a chapter of our life together. This was our haven, our shared hermitage, and I was its lonely custodian. The first intrusion came, as they always seem to, in the form of a shadow falling where it shouldn't. I was directing the movers as they brought the last of the crates, labeled incunabula, fragile, up the driveway. A woman emerged from the perfectly manicured lawn across the street. She was tall and thin, with hair pulled back into a severe bun that seemed to stretch the skin of her face taut. She wore a crisp, sleeveless blouse and linen trousers, an ensemble of aggressive beige. In her hand, she held a phone, which she was using to photograph the moving truck, the crates, and my house. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice hoarse from disuse. Her eyes, the color of faded denim, raked over me with unconcealed disapproval. "I should think so," she said, her voice thin and sharp. "I am Carol Perkins, head of the Neighborhood Aesthetics Committee, and I have several concerns." She gestured with her phone toward the crates. Firstly, the matter of the sheer volume of this delivery. Our bylaws, Section 11B, clearly state that any move-in activities must be completed within a 72-hour window to minimize disruption. This is your 4th day of deliveries. "This is a specialized moving company," I explained patiently, the old professional calm kicking in. They handle delicate items and operate on a specific schedule. She was unmoved. Secondly, the nature of the contents. She squinted at a crate. Books. Box after box of old books. Are you aware of the potential for pest infestation? Silverfish, book lice, termites. An infestation in one home can quickly spread throughout the community. I would feel much more comfortable if I could personally inspect a few of these boxes before they are brought inside. I stared at her, a cold knot forming in my stomach. She wanted to put her hands on our books, to treat these vessels of our shared history as a potential vector for vermin. The request was so profoundly offensive, so deeply ignorant, that it felt like a physical blow. I can assure you, I said, my voice turning to ice, that every item has been professionally treated and is coming from a climate-controlled, pest-free storage facility. An inspection is out of the question. A muscle in her jaw tightened. I see. Uncooperative. She tapped furiously at her phone. And thirdly, this structure, she said, gesturing to the new library annex with profound disgust. It was approved by the board. I see that from the records. But the plans described a home office addition. This windowless, bunker-like edifice is a grotesque violation of the aesthetic harmony of Willow Creek Glade. It's a blight. It's a library, I said flatly. It's built to archival specifications to protect the contents. The contents being the potential fire hazard you are currently importing by the truckload, she retorted. I will be filing a formal complaint with the HOA board regarding all of these issues. You will find, Dr. Vance. She spat my name as if it were an insult, that we take our community standards very seriously here. Very seriously indeed. She turned and marched back to her own home, a beige fortress identical to all the others, leaving me standing in my driveway. The movers looked at me, bewildered. The quiet solace of the morning had been shattered. I had left a world of professional conflict behind, only to find a new kind of tyrant, one who wielded a binder of bylaws instead of a checkbook. She didn't just want to control the color of my house. She wanted to control what was inside it. She wanted the keys to the sanctuary I had built for Eleanor's memory. And in that moment, I knew that the quiet I had come here to find would have to be fought for. The first salvo in Carol Perkins's war of attrition arrived a week later, not with the bang of a cannon, but with the quiet rustle of an envelope being slid under my door. It was a heavy, cream-colored cardstock, the kind used for wedding invitations or declarations of war. Inside, on paper, embossed with the Willow Creek Glade HOA logo, was my first official violation notice. It was, as I might have expected, a masterpiece of petty bureaucracy. Violation Notice, Bylaw 14-7, E. Unapproved window treatments. My crime, it seemed, was the custom-made blackout curtains I had installed on the library's single, north-facing administrative office window. They were a simple, functional charcoal gray, chosen for their superior light-blocking properties. According to the notice, which cited a subsection of a bylaw I was certain had been written with me in mind. All visible window treatments had to be white or off-white to maintain a uniform and pleasing exterior appearance. The accompanying fine was $100. I read the notice with a sigh that was equal parts frustration and resignation. This was her opening move, a test of my compliance. I was a man who had negotiated with the notoriously difficult trustees of the Getty Museum. I could surely handle a dispute over curtains. I went online, ordered a set of off-white blackout curtains, paid the fine, and sent a photo of the newly installed, compliant curtains to the HOA's administrative email address. I told myself it was a small price to pay for peace. Appeasement, I thought. might be the most efficient path to the quiet life I craved. It was a profound miscalculation. My compliance was not seen as a gesture of goodwill, but as an admission of weakness. It signaled to Carol that I was a man who would yield to pressure, and it only emboldened her. The notices began to arrive with the regularity of a metronome. A fine for the low, almost imperceptible hum of the library's dedicated HVAC unit, which Carol claimed violated the neighborhood's noise ordinance levels after 9 p.m., $150. I spent $5,000 on a custom sound dampening enclosure for the unit, reducing its decibel output to that of a whispering librarian. A violation for a commercial-grade delivery van being parked on the street for more than the allowable 2 hours for residential deliveries, $200. A notice of non-compliance because the new gravel I'd laid on the path to the library annex was shale gray, instead of the board-approved Riverstone beige, $75. Each fine, each absurd demand, was a small jab, designed to wear me down. I attended an HOA meeting, hoping to appeal to reason. I stood before Carol and the 2 other board members, a nervous-looking man named Frank, and a woman who seemed perpetually engrossed in her knitting, and calmly explained the specialized needs of my library. "The HVAC unit is not a luxury," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "It is a necessity to maintain a stable environment and prevent the growth of mold, which I'm sure we all agree would be a far greater threat to the community than a low hum." Carol listened with an expression of patronizing boredom. "Dr. Vance," she said when I had finished, her voice dripping with condescension. "While your hobby is no doubt very important to you, the bylaws exist to protect the peace and property values of all residents. We cannot make exceptions simply because you have decided to fill your home with an excessive amount of flammable, pest-attracting material." The other board members refused to meet my eye. It was a tribunal, not a discussion. That night, I called Genevieve Sterling, the chief curator at the Huntington and my oldest friend. We had met in the dusty basement of a Bodleian Library reading room 30 years ago, and had been allies ever since. "Elias, you sound exhausted," she said, her sharp wit cutting through the phone line. "Don't tell me retirement is more strenuous than authenticating a disputed Caxton." I chuckled wearily and told her about my local potentate. "An HOA queen," she mused. "The most dangerous of all suburban fauna. She sounds dreadful. She's making it impossible to find any peace. Jen, this place was supposed to be, for Eleanor, a quiet place. And this woman is turning it into a battlefield over beige gravel." "I know, Elias," she said, her voice softening. "But be careful. These petty tyrants who crave control can be more dangerous than any forger. They don't respect boundaries. To her, your library isn't a treasure. It's a secret, and she will not rest until she knows what it is." Document everything, every notice, every conversation. Create a paper trail. Build your provenance of her persecution. Her use of the word provenance, the term we use for an artifact's chain of ownership and history, struck me. That's what I had to do. I had to treat Carol's campaign of harassment like a rare, toxic manuscript, documenting its every feature, tracing its origins, preparing to present my findings. I created a new file on my computer, the Perkins Archive, and began scanning every notice, logging every interaction with timestamps and detailed notes. I was a scholar, a researcher. This was just a new, and infinitely more frustrating, field of study. My quiet life had become a case study in suburban pathology. The move from bureaucratic warfare to physical aggression was as subtle and insidious as foxing on a page of ancient paper. Carol, having failed to regulate me into submission, decided to lay siege to the library itself. It began one morning when I found a large, muddy puddle pooled against the western wall, the wall nearest her property. Her lawn sprinkler head had been twisted around, aimed directly at the base of my library wall. My blood ran cold. It was a deliberate, malicious act. She was trying to create water damage, to force moisture into the walls of the one place on Earth that needed to be perfectly, absolutely dry. The thought of water seeping towards our books, towards Eleanor's legacy, sent a jolt of pure, protective fury through me. I remembered a small flood in our old apartment's basement storage years ago. A single crate of modern first editions had been ruined. I remembered Eleanor's tears, not for the monetary loss, but for the stories that had been silenced. I would not let that happen again. Instead of confronting Carol, I channeled my fury into a meticulous, scientific response. I pulled out my architectural plans and my moisture meter. The specialized concrete, mixed with a waterproofing admixture, was sound. The French drain system had channeled the excess water away perfectly. The multi-layered vapor barrier had done its job. My sanctuary was unbreached. Later that afternoon, I saw Carol on her lawn, pretending to prune her roses, her eyes constantly flicking toward my library wall, searching for any sign of her victory. I made a point of going outside with a clipboard and my moisture meter, taking readings with a look of calm, academic concentration. Her face, when she saw me, was a mask of frustration. My neighbor from next door, Tom, a retired civil engineer with kind eyes and a quiet demeanor, came over to the fence that separated our properties. "Trouble with the sprinkler?" he asked, though his tone suggested he knew it was more than that. "You could say that," I replied grimly. Tom sighed, leaning against a fence post. "Look, Elias, I've lived here for 20 years. I've seen Carol in action, but this feels different, more personal. If you don't mind me asking, what is in that building that has her so obsessed?" I hesitated. I hadn't spoken of my past, or of Eleanor, to anyone in the neighborhood. But Tom's face held a genuine concern that felt different from the prying curiosity of others. "It's a library," I said simply. "A private collection. My life's work. My late wife's, too." Tom nodded slowly, a look of understanding dawning in his eyes. "I see. So it's not just a building to you." He was quiet for a moment. "My wife, Martha, she passed 5 years ago. She was a quilter. Her sewing room. It's still exactly as she left it. I understand needing to protect a space like that. The unexpected kinship was a balm on a raw wound. I'm sorry for your loss. Tom, you too," he said quietly. "Listen, about Carol. There are rumors about why she is the way she is. Something that happened in her old neighborhood, before they moved here. It's just gossip. But maybe it's more. I've got a friend who's a real estate agent, knows the history of every development in this county. Let me make a call. Maybe if we understand why she's doing this, we can figure out how to stop her." Tom's offer was an unexpected lifeline. A few days later, my security cameras captured a hooded figure scattering weed seeds into the flower beds around the library. I saved the footage and the soil sample, adding them to the Perkins archive. She was trying to surround my pristine archive with a crawling, ugly infestation, a physical manifestation of her own invasive nature. I was no longer just on the defensive. I was building a case. And now, I had an ally. She thought she was laying siege to my library, but in truth, she was meticulously documenting her own downfall. Having failed to breach my library's physical defenses, Carol shifted her tactics to a battlefield where truth is malleable, and perception is reality, the court of public opinion. The Willow Creek Glade Community Facebook group became her personal propaganda machine. Her campaign of social isolation and slander was a masterclass in passive-aggressive character assassination. The opening shot was a post that was as saccharine as it was poisonous. "Hello, lovely neighbors," it began. "Just a friendly reminder about fire safety in our community. It's so important to be mindful of storing large quantities of flammable materials in our homes." She never mentioned my name. She didn't have to. The comment section quickly filled with the kind of thinly veiled panic she was hoping to incite. The effect was immediate and chilling. The couple 2 doors down herded their children inside when they saw me. Frank, the nervous board member, actively avoided my gaze. I was no longer just the quiet, new neighbor. I was the fire hazard. A few days later, Tom came over, a grim look on his face. "I spoke to my friend," he said, his voice low. "He dug up the story on the Perkinses. It's worse than the gossip." We sat on my back patio, the one place I felt I could speak without being watched. "Before they moved here," Tom began, "they lived in a place called Northwood Estates. Their next-door neighbor was a quiet man, a retired accountant, kept to himself. For years, everything was fine. Then, one night, the whole street was lit up with police lights, SWAT teams, federal agents. It turned out the accountant was running a massive Ponzi scheme from his home office. He had bilked dozens of people, including many in the neighborhood, out of their life savings. The Perkinses had invested heavily with him. They lost everything: their retirement, their kids' college funds. They had to declare bankruptcy and sell their house for a fraction of its worth. The revelation was like a key turning in a lock. "So her obsession," I began. "It's not just about property values," Tom finished. "It's about secrets. A quiet, secretive neighbor destroyed her life once before. In her mind, you're him. You're a man with a secret, locked away in a private, fortified room. She's not just a busybody, Elias. She's a woman reliving her worst trauma, and she's cast you as the villain." The knowledge didn't make me feel sympathy for Carol, not when I was the target of her pathological crusade. But it did fill me with a cold, hard understanding. She was not rational. She was driven by a ghost, and she would not stop until she had exorcised it, no matter the cost to me. That evening, I called Genevieve again. I told her about the weeds, the Facebook posts, and what Tom had discovered. Her voice was steel. "This is a pattern, Elias. It's not just about bylaws anymore. It's about her trauma. You need to treat this as a serious threat. She is escalating, and you need to be prepared for her next move. Keep collecting data. Wait for her to overplay her hand." A few days later, Carol posted again, this time about the dangers of mold spores and dust mites from large unventilated collections of old paper. The irony was staggering. My library's air was likely cleaner than that of an operating room. But the neighbors didn't know that. The social quarantine intensified. The loneliness was a heavy cloak, reminding me of the first few months after Eleanor's death. I retreated to the library, the one place I didn't feel judged. I was reshelving some books when I came across a photograph I kept tucked inside a copy of The Histories by Herodotus. It was of me and Eleanor, 20 years ago, at the opening of the Vance Wing at the British Library, a reading room we had endowed. We looked so happy, so full of shared purpose. I looked at the man in the photo, and then at my own reflection in the dark glass of the library door. I had allowed Carol to define me. I had been so committed to my quiet grief that I had let her create this false, monstrous narrative. That evening, I took the photograph out of the book, put it in a handsome silver frame, and placed it on the main desk in my home office, the room at the front of the house, the one with the large window facing the street. I left the lamp on my desk on that night, illuminating the photo. It was a small, passive act, a quiet counter-narrative. It was a piece of evidence submitted to the jury of any curious onlookers. Let them see it. Let Carol see it. Let them wonder what kind of fire hazard gets a wing of a world-famous library named after him. The day the fire marshal arrived was the day Carol's campaign of insinuation escalated into a direct assault using the blunt instrument of state power. It was a Tuesday morning. I was in my library, engaged in the delicate process of deacidifying the pages of a fragile 18th century atlas, a task that required absolute concentration. The sudden jarring sound of a heavy fist banging on my front door felt like a physical blow. I knew, with a cold certainty, who was behind this. I opened the door to find a uniformed fire marshal and a city inspector. The marshal, a man with a weathered face and weary eyes, held a clipboard. "Dr. Elias Vance," he asked, "we've received a formal, signed complaint from a Ms. Carol Perkins, alleging that this property contains a significant and unpermitted fire load, constituting a clear and present danger to the neighborhood." She had finally done it. She had put her name to her lies. My neighbors were already peeking out from behind their curtains. This was not just an inspection. It was a public shaming. "Of course. Please, come in," I said, my voice a mask of calm. I led them to the heavy, fire-rated steel door of the library annex. I pushed open the heavy door, and the air from the library cool, dry, and smelling faintly of old paper and leather wafted out. I stepped aside and gestured for them to enter. I watched their faces as they stepped inside. They had come expecting to find a hoarder's nest. What they found instead was a scene of scholarly order and cutting-edge technology. "Are those sprinklers?" the inspector asked, pointing upwards. "No," I replied. "This is a clean agent fire suppression system, argonite gas. In the event of a fire, the system floods the room with an inert gas that displaces the oxygen, extinguishing the flame instantly without causing any damage. Water is often more destructive to rare books than fire itself." The fire marshal walked over to the control panel for the system. He let out a low whistle. "This is a museum-grade system," he said, turning to me with a new look in his eyes, a look of professional respect. "I've only ever seen setups like this at the university's special collections. I take preservation very seriously," I said quietly. They spent the next 20 minutes conducting their inspection, but the tone had shifted. They were no longer looking for violations. They were observing a masterclass in archival safety. "Dr. Vance," the fire marshal said as they concluded, "I apologize for the intrusion. Your complainant, Ms. Perkins, seems to have a fundamental misunderstanding of the difference between a collection and a fire hazard. This is not only the safest private library I have ever seen. It's safer than 99% of the commercial buildings in this city." He made a few notes on his form. "Frankly, sir, this feels like a misuse of my department's resources. We have actual fires to worry about." As they left, I walked them to the door. Carol was standing on her lawn, arms crossed, waiting for the verdict. She saw the expression on the fire marshal's face, and her triumphant smirk dissolved into a mask of confused fury. The weapon she had chosen had not only failed to harm me, but it had certified my fortress as impenetrable. As I closed my front door, I knew with a chilling certainty that her next attack would not be through any official channels. She had been thwarted by the system. Now, she would go around it. I immediately called Genevieve. She's escalated. She used the city. Good. Genevieve's voice was grimly satisfied. She's creating a public record of her harassment. We can use that. Keep collecting data. Elias, wait for her final move. She's going to make a mistake. The final escalation was a direct, personal, and viciously calculated threat designed to utterly destroy my life's work and my reputation. Carol, having been publicly humiliated by the fire marshal's validation of my library, had been stewing for a week. The quiet before a storm. She chose her moment perfectly, confronting me at dusk as I returned from my evening walk. She was dressed in a severe black dress, as if for a funeral. My funeral. She was holding a thick, glossy folder. "Dr. Vance," she said, her voice a low, venomous hiss. "We need to have a talk." She opened the folder, revealing a printout of my old professional biography from an auction house website. "A private investigator," she said with self-satisfaction. "Expensive, but worth it. You've been very careful, but you can't erase your past. Dr. Elias Vance, leading expert in incunabula. A very impressive career." My blood ran cold. She had invaded my past. A past I had deliberately cordoned off from my new life. "And then," she continued, "I started looking into the ethics of your profession. A world where provenance can be forged, and where priceless artifacts are sometimes misplaced, especially by the very experts who are supposed to be guarding them." The accusation was monstrous. She was implying that I was a thief, that my life's collection, our collection, was stolen. "You live here, with a private, fortified museum in your backyard," she pressed on, her eyes glittering with a fanatic's zeal. "A collection worth tens of millions of dollars. You have no visible source of income. It's a very convenient story. It reminds me of another man who had a very convenient story. A man who smiled to my face while he was stealing my family's future." The ghost of her past was now fully present, speaking through her. She held up the final piece of paper, a letter. "This is addressed to the Acquisitions and Ethics Committees of the Getty, the Morgan Library, and the British Library, and to the Art Crime Division of the FBI. It outlines my concerns. It suggests that a full investigation into your acquisitions over the past 30 years might be warranted." This was it. The nuclear option. A mere accusation of this nature, even if proven false, would cast a shadow over my entire career. It would taint our collection, making it a subject of suspicion rather than scholarship. It would desecrate Eleanor's memory. "I know I can't force my way into your library," she said, "but I can force the rest of the world in. Or, you can give me what I want. You will provide the HOA board with a key to your library for a safety and structural assessment. You will prove to us that you have nothing to hide. You will do this by Friday at noon. If you refuse, this letter gets sent. Your choice. Doctor." Cooperation or devastation. She believed she had me. But as I looked at her, I didn't just see a tyrant. I saw a woman so broken by her past that she was willing to break everything around her. But my library was not just a collection. It was a trust. It was the last piece of my life with Eleanor, and I would not, could not, surrender it. A strange calm settled over me. "Thank you for making your position so clear, Carol," I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. "Friday at noon, then. I will have my answer for you and the board. I suggest you make sure everyone is present. It promises to be a very educational meeting." I turned and walked into my house. The time for defense was over. I picked up the phone. "Genevieve," I said when she answered. "This is it. She's threatening to go to the FBI." "Excellent." Genevieve's voice was decisive. "The trap is set. I'm booking a flight. It's time to introduce Ms. Perkins to the concept of provenance." The special meeting of the Willow Creek Glade Homeowners Association was staged by Carol as her ultimate coronation. She had called it under the Charter's emergency provisions, citing the need for an urgent vote on a matter of community security. Tom had called me to warn me, his voice tight with anger. "She's lost it, Elias. She's telling people you're some kind of international art thief." "I know, Tom," I had replied. "Just be there. You'll want to see this." I arrived precisely on time, taking a seat in the back row. The room was tense, filled with neighbors who had been whipped into a state of anxious suspicion. Carol stood at a podium, flanked by the other two board members and a sour-faced man she introduced as a certified structural engineer. She recounted her entire campaign against me, framing her harassment as diligent oversight and my requests for privacy as proof of guilt. "I have recently uncovered some very disturbing information about Dr. Vance's past," she announced gravely. "He was a high-level consultant in a world rife with theft and fraud. He now lives here, with a private museum of suspicious origin worth countless millions of dollars." A shocked murmur rippled through the crowd. "He reminds me of a man who smiled to my face while he was stealing my family's future. I will not let that happen again." "I have presented him with an ultimatum," she declared, her voice rising to a crescendo. "Either he provides the board with a key and full access to his library, or I will be forced to share my findings with federal law enforcement. I am now calling for a formal vote. A vote to compel Dr. Vance to submit to a full and complete inspection, or face immediate legal action." All in favor, hands shot up across the room. It was nearly unanimous. Carol's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated triumph. She looked directly at me. "Dr. Vance," she said, savoring the moment. "The community has spoken. Do you have a response?" "I do," I said, my voice calm and clear. I stood up, but I didn't look at her. I looked toward the back of the room. "But my response is not for you." As if on cue, the doors to the clubhouse swung open. Two figures entered. The first was Dr. Genevieve Sterling, exuding an aura of academic authority and quiet power. The second was a man in the crisp uniform of a high-end security firm. She walked down the aisle with a poise that immediately commanded the room's attention, holding a professional-looking aluminum briefcase. She stopped beside my chair and gave me a warm, reassuring smile before turning her attention to the stunned assembly. "Good evening," she said, her voice the rich, cultured alto of a lifelong academic. "My apologies for the interruption. My name is Dr. Genevieve Sterling. I am the chief curator of rare books and manuscripts for the Huntington Library." A wave of confused whispers washed over the room. Carol's triumphant expression faltered, replaced by a mask of sudden, profound uncertainty. "I am here this evening at the express invitation of my esteemed colleague and dear friend, Dr. Elias Vance," Genevieve continued, her gaze settling, like a laser, on Carol. "I understand there has been some local concern regarding the nature and safety of his personal library. Allow me to clarify. Dr. Vance's library is not a concern. It is, by private academic consensus, one of the most important privately held collections of Western literature in the world." Genevieve turned to the sour-faced engineer. "And you, sir, your specialty is in residential swimming pools. Is it not? I doubt your expertise extends to the archival requirements for the preservation of incunabula." The man shrank back, his face turning a shade of mottled red. Genevieve then turned her full, icy attention back to Carol. "Ms. Perkins, Dr. Vance has shared with me your correspondence, your violation notices, your online posts, and your final remarkable letter of extortion. You have accused one of the world's most respected bibliophiles of being a thief." She placed her aluminum briefcase on a nearby table and opened it. Inside, nestled in custom-cut foam, lay two enormous, leather-bound books. "Dr. Vance has graciously agreed to loan two minor items from his collection to the Huntington for our upcoming exhibition," Genevieve announced to the silent, gaping room. "I am here, along with a licensed and bonded fine art transport team, to oversee the packing." She carefully lifted one of the books with gloved hands. "This," she said, her voice resonating with historical weight, "is a copy of the first folio of William Shakespeare's plays, printed in 1623, and this is the second folio, from 1632. For insurance purposes, we will be valuing these two items, conservatively, at $15 million. The collective gasp in the room was a physical thing. $15 million. Carol's face had gone from triumphant to confused to the color of ash. Her jaw was slack, her eyes wide with sheer, uncomprehending horror. "So you see, Ms. Perkins," Genevieve concluded, her voice like chips of ice, "you were not seeking access to a fire hazard. You were attempting to force your way into a vault containing priceless cultural artifacts. Your campaign of harassment, your threats, and your attempt to compel access under duress could very well be construed by our legal team as attempted trespass and conspiracy to enable the theft of World Heritage items. We take such matters very seriously." She looked at Carol, whose entire world had just been demolished. "Now, I believe you were calling for a vote." The denouement was less a gentle falling action and more a controlled demolition. The Huntington Library's legal department, as Genevieve had threatened, sent a cease and desist letter that detailed Carol's campaign of harassment and outlined her potential civil and criminal liabilities. The HOA's insurance provider dropped them. The board members resigned. The community, now fully aware of the truth, turned on Carol with the ferocity of a betrayed mob. The HOA, uninsured and facing a catastrophic legal threat, sued her personally to mitigate their own damages, beset by legal fees. Her beige fortress went on the market. It was a fire sale. The last I saw of her, she was loading boxes into a small moving truck herself, her face a haggard mask of defeat. In her, I saw the tragic end of a woman so consumed by a past trauma that she had destroyed her own future by trying to control it. A new HOA board was elected, with a reasonable and slightly overwhelmed Tom at its head. Their first act was to repeal the Perkins Amendments. The neighborhood, humbled and slightly starstruck, began to treat my home with a new kind of reverence. The suspicion was replaced by a fierce, protective pride. As for me, I found the peace I had sought. The Folios returned safely from their journey, and my life returned to a quiet rhythm of reading and research. One evening, I sat in my favorite leather chair, the air still and cool. I was holding a small, well-worn volume of poetry Eleanor had given me on our first anniversary. The silence of the room was no longer heavy with loss, but filled with the music of the stacks. A peaceful, resonant quiet that was the truest testament to our shared love. My fortress had weathered its storm. The barbarian was gone from the gates. And inside, surrounded by the immortal voices of the past and the enduring presence of her memory, I was finally, profoundly, at peace.